So, now that we have collected all of our missing party members, we can now continue our journey into darkness. Though, well, I did do a little bit of off-screen grinding, not only for levels, but for a few items, because we are pretty much in the home stretch towards the end of the game, and as such, it is good to be prepared. In my case, not only did I get levels, but I also leveled up pretty much all of Koudelka's offensive spells. And for James, I went ahead and leveled up his Fortify spells, at least the useful ones. We never really need Fortify Luck or Mind. I also went ahead and leveled up some of Edward's weapon proficiencies, not all of them. Mostly the two-handed sword, because there are some pretty useful two-handed swords you can find near the end of the game here. And equipment-wise, managed to get a Cat's Eye, which is a melee weapon that does give a boost to magic stats, and it is literally a cat's eye. And melee weapon-wise, got a few more of the save game items, such as the Gargoyle Killer here, which I show off in a bonus video, and Ogden's Axe. Both of them pretty useful, though they are kind of double-edged swords. Yeah, outside of all that, our next destination is going to be all the way back down in the basement, in the dungeon. You might recall we finally managed to get both of the dolls that those two siblings in front of the door were wanting. And that is going to be where we are heading next. And it can be quite a bit of a journey, though the mask you hopefully picked up will limit the amount of lower level enemy fights you have to get into. And I will say, if you're curious about how I managed to level up the magic so much, if you come up here and decide to fight Valna and Vigna again, if you manage to not give them the doll, you can get into pretty easy fight where you can just grind out magic levels and weapon experience on them, so it can be a pretty useful tip, though, well, we don't really need to worry about that anymore, so we can go ahead and get that key they're holding onto by giving them their dolls. And we aren't going to have to go too far to use that key, because as you recall, the door we need to use it on is right nearby. Also, I do find it, I guess, slightly darkly humorous, the fact that they add on that again part to that whole comment about Valna and Vigna being dead. By going through the door here, we're not treated to a brand new area just yet. You might recall that dungeon in the background was where we fell into so long ago. And overall, this is still a pretty low-level area, so you can't run into anything too dangerous down here. And in fact, I kind of went a little bit overboard on these poor flying heads. Still, even though we did manage to level up here, our reward, pretty much for any of the fights we're going to get into down here, is not going to be that great. Yeah, just some antidotes and some cheese, neither of which is extremely useful at this point. And it's a bit hard to see. There is an item on the ground, but all it is a potion, which I think only heals about 250, so it's just kind of taking up inventory space. No, all this area is just a little bit of a small transition point to get to our next real area. It's just there is going to be one little roadblock before we can really get to that part yet. and that is Charlotte's cell. Yeah, we finally get to Charlotte's room, and it seems that she might have been expecting us, as she did lay us out a little bit of a meal here. It's just, where is our host? Before we are given the honor of meeting Charlotte, we do have to deal with this little mini-boss encounter here with some poltergeist-infested furniture. And these aren't too massively different from the furniture that we fought in the past. They do have quite a bit of vitality, and they can do quite a bit in the way of melee damage. Really, I think the only real gimmick to this fight overall is that I think one piece of furniture takes, half damage from melee attacks, and the other piece of furniture takes half damage from magic, and I don't know. It's really not something to take into account, though I always do manage to mix up which one is which. I think the chair, as we saw from the gunshots there, more the weaker to the physical attacks, and process of elimination, that means the bookshelf here is weaker to elemental attacks. It's just once you've gotten Koudelka's magic up to level 3 and you've given her a relatively large amount of intelligence, yeah, their gimmick really doesn't even factor in. Still, I do think that their melee attacks can cause status ailments. It just seems to be pretty infrequent. And overall, this just seems to be a bit of a minor annoyance to trying to really get to Charlotte. I suppose if you are lucky, you might manage to get the furniture to stand side by side, and you could maybe hit them with Koudelka's higher level spells with just one turn. Just at this point, I decided to go ahead and speed it up, just mostly because I kind of underestimated how much health the chair had left. So it took a few more turns than it probably should have.
Charlotte, do you know what these are? They're letters from your mother.
My mother? Letters? There's so many!
Did you know that your mother was a queen of Hanover? It seems that after you were born in secret, your mother was locked up inside Alden Castle. Even while she was imprisoned there, she sent many letters to you here in the monastery. She never laid eyes on you, but she often imagined what you looked like. She dreamt of the day when she would be able to see you. Her letters never got to you, and she was never told of your death, so she continued to write you letters even after you died. Your mother loved you, Charlotte.
What? No, I can't take this now. She love me? No, it's too scary. Hey, I feel warm. What's happening? No, help me. You're not gonna breathe here? You love me? I hate you. Don't break me. You.
Charlotte, how does it feel to know you are loved?
And with that, Charlotte's pitiful existence reaches its very sad climax. Born of a forbidden passion in prison for a reason she probably only had a very fleeting understanding of, and never really knowing the love that her mother felt for her all this time. It's really hard to say if this was a really good ending for this character. It's really hard to say if there would have been any real positive way to end the story for poor Charlotte. And while our victory might initially seem hollow, considering we didn't have a real boss fight, we do end up finding a reward where Charlotte dissipated in the form of the flare brooch here. This is probably one of the best accessories you can get in the game, and in fact the flare brooch ends up appearing in the rest of the Shadowheart series, getting successively better and better as it progresses through the story. For our purposes though, it's pretty much like any other accessory. It does give a boost to quite a few of the mental stats. The main difference with other accessories though is that this one does give a boost to vitality. And for any of our caster characters, that can be a pretty significant boon. And even though it's not really necessary, I can always upgrade Edward's pitiful mental stats. Yeah, sometimes you can find items with the same name, and they will have slightly different stats, depending, I guess, on the level of monster that dropped it. But with Charlotte now out of the way, we can finally maybe head off to a brand new area. And while we do have some time to look around, you might be thinking to yourself, overall this doesn't seem like that bad of a cell. It's pretty spacious, it's got plenty of accommodations. It even seems like you could probably entertain some guests. It might seem not that bad on the surface, it's just once we head outside of it, well, we are pretty quickly reminded of the very horrible situation that Charlotte was in. I can only imagine the smell that must have been coming downwind. And if you're wondering why there is such an amassment of bodies here, well, that's because we have managed to reach the very heart of evil here with Patrick's quarters, as he is pretty much been revealed to be the mastermind behind all the horrible stuff that's been going on here at the Nemeton Monastery, at least in present times. Now, we do have quite a number of ways we can go. First off, though, we do want to go ahead and throw back the bolt on this out-of-the-way door here, because that does give us access to the inner grounds where, well, we can head back and fight the gargoyle if we want, or we can head back downstairs and talk to our little hint buddy. For now, though, we do want to keep on exploring Patrick's quarters, and the first door we want to go to is this pretty out-of-the-way one up here amongst all the furniture. But before we do that, we are introduced to an enemy that I think we should have run into far, far earlier in the game. I think this enemy is called a Spectre, and by all accounts, I think this is supposed to be a fairly common enemy. It's just, somehow or another, we just have never ran across it. I think it is a caster-type enemy, and at this point, it probably has some pretty high vitality and a few random spells that it could cast if we gave it time. It's pretty slow compared to what we can do. And overall, I guess it would be good to point out at this particular junction, I think we've seen probably 90% of the enemies available in the game. There's actually only a pretty small number of enemies you can find. I think all total there's probably only about 25 normal enemies and probably 20 total bosses you can probably face. And that's a pretty small selection of enemies for an RPG. But yeah, as we scale our way up to this very tiny door here, may not seem the first place you'd want to go, but it is definitely where you want to head first. Because amongst all this bric-a-brac here, you can probably find some hidden away crossbow bolts. But even more importantly than that, inside the far wall here, if you do take a look at it, you'll see that there is a hidden door. Now, you might be wondering where the mechanism is, and Koudelka, with her eagle eye, immediately notices it, which is this statue up here. It seems to be on a pressure plate. And waiting for us behind this door will be an old, familiar face.
I know it's around here somewhere. Well, what took you so long?
Roger,
The mummy
I
that was in
haven't...
the coffin? Since when have you two been acquainted?
I am no mummy. My name is Roger Bacon, and I'm just like any normal old man.
Hey, I've been around for 20 years, and I have yet to run across an old man as abnormal as yourself.
I see. Well, I've been around for 600 years, and I've seen plenty of abnormal people just like myself.
My dear old man, might you be related to the great warlock Roger Bacon, who made such a name for himself in the 13th century?
You are very knowledgeable. I am that warlock, Roger Bacon, you speak of.
You mean to tell me that you were born in 1210 and have remained alive and well until the present date of 1898?
Actually, to be precise, I was born in 1214.
Koudelka, what type of a joke is this?
That's my question.
This is no joke. I am the reputable Roger Bacon.
Very well then. If you were truly that Roger Bacon, then you'll be able to tell me with whom and where you studied.
Oh, that's easy. I entered Oxford in 1247 and studied under the tutelage of Robert Grosseteste. Although a good professor, I would not consider him to be a wise man. I penned my masterpiece, Opus Maius, as well as numerous other books on natural science. Being a visionary pioneer, I must say that my work has influenced generations of work that followed. But alas, in hindsight, that work pales in comparison to the work I did, copying the Immigré document for the Pope.
The Immigré documents. I figured you would know about that book.
Of course. It took me 5 years to copy the book in its entirety. I know everything there is to know about the book.
What is it about?
Oh,
Is
it
it...
unravels the secrets of life that expand far beyond the largest field. It speaks of the secret rituals conducted by the ancient race of Fomors on immortality. The Fomors would claim the lives of the resurrected as their own. They reversed the laws of nature and the cycle of life. When the Druids took over the Celts, Alexander the Great penned the Immigré documents in Greek for placement in the Great Library.
Resurrecting the dead.
Oh,
It is true.
The document has long been considered the most dangerous work of literature. It was safely guarded in the caverns of the Supreme Pontiff's quarters. But apparently, the book was not able to withstand the wears of time over generations. And the Pope decreed that a new edition be created by copying the full text. That is where I came in. The Pope requested that I copy the book word for word. And when the work was finished, apparently, I was supposed to be killed. But I am not one to be dealt with so carelessly. I secretly escaped, and eventually I made my way to the sacred land referred to in the text of the Immigré document.
And the secret rituals? Don't tell me.
You need look no further than myself.
And you succeeded.
Though I cannot perform the same on others, yes, I have been able to escape the hands of death. But I have not been able to escape the roots of existence, which are the seeds of change. My body is not immune to change, as you can see by my hideous appearance. I've had nothing to do other than roam the earth for the last 300 years. I've seen all I can take of mankind's cruelty. So, I returned here for some rest. Well, enough of this gossip. I've got some research to do. May I ask to be left alone?
So we have another, almost coherent and much more livelier conversation with Roger Bacon. And I think what was most important to glean from that entire conversation was the mere fact that Roger seems to have a very intimate knowledge of the Immigrate document. And what that means for us in the future is that we might finally have a good source of information in case we need to learn anything more about that ancient Druidic text. For now, though, as Roger does want to be left alone, we'll just keep on poking around Patrick's quarters here. We don't have too many other places we can go right now. Especially considering that this particular door is currently being locked by a boss fight. Through sheer process of elimination, that just leaves the one final door back on the first floor. And since we are in Patrick's quarters here, it does kind of bring to mind the fact that, well, as opposed to most other RPGs where you are pretty much constantly harangued by a central antagonist or antagonistic force, instead, Koudelka kind of bucks that trend, and instead its story deals more with the aftermath of, I guess, the villain's evil plot. In this case, all this evil seems to stem from whatever evil ritual that Patrick was trying to use to bring back Elaine. And it really brings to mind, I guess, a parallel with Resident Evil, which this game, I think, had quite a bit of inspiration from. I mean, with Resident Evil, you were a, paramilitary force sent in to, I guess, figure out what happened with another paramilitary force. And you pretty much had to deal with the aftermath of, Umbrella's fuck-up. In this case, we are not really a paramilitary force, but we are pretty much having to deal with Patrick's fuck-up. And it's just one more reminder that they were really, really trying hard to get a good mixture of survival horror and basic RPG elements. And I do kind of appreciate that. Along with, the voice acting and all the other positives that this game does have. Especially its very lovely backdrops here. And before we can continue on, we do want to make sure and investigate this very, very large gramophone here. Good thing is we did manage to pick up that gramophone disc, because it is a key necessary for our progression. More importantly, it allows us access to these research notes. And point of fact, these are Patrick's research notes, and, well, we won't be reading them right now. They are pretty lengthy, but I'll read them in a bonus video. Needless to say, they do outline a lot of the horrible and grisly things he did to try to, successfully perform the ritual on Elaine. And yeah, if you were wondering where that boss fight is, we have stumbled into the room where it is. Though speaking of Elaine, we do have a very large portrait here of her, though thankfully we aren't going to have to fight that. Instead, the boss we are going to have to fight, I think, makes a lot more sense if you do happen to read through the research notes. Because this particular monstrosity of flailing limbs and horribleness is sometimes either referred to as the scapegoat, or I think in some places it's referred to as Jezebel. Yeah, from reading Patrick's research notes, you'll find that his primary target, as he moved on to human victims, were primarily women in London. I think they were mostly streetwalkers or just any random person that happened to be out on the street late at night that he could chloroform and bring back to the monastery here to butcher and maim and drain of their blood. And from what I can tell, this is supposed to be all that female hatred and body parts amalgamated into just sheer pain and sorrow. And it's just makes a lot more sense if you do happen to read, but it's a pretty horrifying boss once you know the backstory of it. Overall, though, the boss itself is pretty easy. It can do quite a bit in regards to melee damage, and the one or two spells it can cast are really not anything to balk at. Also, I think it can drain you of HP and MP if given the chance, though. I mean, it does have quite a bit in the way of health and doesn't really have much in the way of elemental defenses. But it's still... I don't know. I don't want to say we're over-leveled for this point, but maybe getting to the level 3 spells might have been a little bit overkill. Still, it is good that we have finally been able to start putting some use in for James in regards to the buffing of stats. Sometimes hard to realize, just from +9 to AP, what really that means to Edward's attack power here. But considering we did only about 500 before, and we do another 200 now, if we did manage to cast plus strength again, he could probably almost be doubling his damage. No, that's still really nothing in comparison to the sheer damage numbers that Koudelka still continues to output. And for laying that poor tortured monstrosity to rest, we do get quite a bit in the way of XP. And at this point, we're just going to be continuing on the ways we have been going. We probably don't need to focus on agility or vitality that much anymore. All the characters are pretty good in those areas, especially considering we did get James a piece of chest armor, which is why he is up to a whopping 3,600 health. And our final reward for that boss fight is a new pistol, and also our final spell of the game. As you can probably guess from the name, Reflect allows us to cast a reflective spell on each of our party members, and that will bounce back any spells that are cast on them. This obviously has the, double-edged blade of the fact that also includes our own spell, so once you cast Reflect on someone, you can no longer cast Cure on them. But it can be pretty useful in fights where the enemy does primarily focus on using magic. Also, the automatic pistol is indeed a Luger. It's got a bigger ammo clip and it does a little bit more damage. It's just at this point, there's really not that much of a reason to use pistols anymore. And in fact, here I was thinking it might be worth changing away from the longsword, though outside of our special weapons, there's not really anything that's probably as good as the longsword, so we'll just go ahead and keep with that equipment, and that means that door on the upper floor should be unlocked, so we can head back up there.
So this is Elaine.
Yes. She's the one I had the psychic vision of. Do you doubt it?
No, indeed.
Good. Let's begin.
It has been a long time indeed, Mr. O'Flaherty.
Oh, Elaine, is that really you?
Yes, it is. It is such a pity that we meet again, and I can only present myself to you in this form. This is the woman that responded to my voice, is it not? thank you for doing this for someone like myself.
Elaine, I haven't yet come to terms. Please tell me how this happened to you.
Of course I will explain. James, 18 years ago, I was murdered by some thieves that broke into my home. I was helpless. Both Patrick and Ogden were out on business. There was nothing that anyone could do.
I will not accept this. This should not have happened.
Yes, Patrick responded the same exact way. He could not accept my death. He spent years and years perfecting his craft in wizardry and tried everything in his power to bring me back to life.
Resurrecting the dead? Is this for real? Hey, we're not talking about Frankenstein here.
Frankenstein?
That novel written about 100 years ago?
He was taking it very seriously. And he had found the key to actually make it happen.
The immigrant document.
Yes. With Ogden's assistance and the powers from ancient druids, he held a resurrection ceremony in this monastery.
But something went wrong, didn't it?
He only resurrected my physical body. As you can see, my soul is still doomed to roaming the universe, forever separated from my body. And the terrifying thing is that my body was resurrected as a heartless monster.
Monster.
Although the monster may look like me, it is not me. Mr. O'Flaherty, please turn my body into ashes with your powers.
Ashes. But if I do that, we won't be able to bring you back to life.
Mr. O'Flaherty, I was robbed of my life by those thieves, and I could hate them as mortal enemies. Choose to think that my death was preordained by the Lord. Please, do not mourn my death. It was wrong for Patrick to try to resurrect me, to undo the work of God. Please, do not be sad. Death is at the heart of God's reasoning. I urge you to destroy my body. Its existence defies the wise providence of heaven. It mustn't exist in this world.
Wait! Elaine! God! Curse! What a cruel world! I gave everything for your happiness, and now what am I left with? I have no meaning in my life. Damn it! What have I been doing with my life? Elaine! Elaine!
And as the last bit of hope leaves poor James's soul, the reality of the matter starts to set in, and that's the fact that there is just no saving Elaine. In fact, she has accepted her fate and wishes to move on, which only makes matters worse because the only way to seemingly do that is to burn up her final remains. Still, we do have to keep on pressing forward, and through that door that we unlocked via the boss fight, we do find a pretty sterile, cold study, though there is a nice burning fire here in the hearth. Also, we do want to make sure and check this nearby bookshelf, because amongst the books we do find a pretty obvious hint for something in the future. Just so happens that one of our party members is able to speak Greek and knows that Hestia apparently means hearth. And while that doesn't mean the nearby fireplace here, as it does have a rather roaring fire in it, it is good to keep in mind because, well, we might find another fireplace somewhere in the future. So the game does keep on giving us shotgun shells, so we are getting up a nice storehouse of those, though I'm going to be holding off on switching to a shotgun, at least for right now. we do find ourselves finally in Patrick's laboratory, where first off, we do want to explore and look into this cabinet here. Of course, we do find a fairly innocuous empty bottle, and believe it or not, this will be very important for the future. Along with that, amongst all his instruments here, we also do find a scale, which initially doesn't seem like it would be that useful, but it will be important to keep in mind that Koudelka does weigh 45 kilograms. Also, I should say that for all the bloody experiments that I assume Patrick did, his laboratory is pretty spick and span. And speaking of weight, this memo that we just found is not, a normal piece of reading. Instead, it is another hint for another puzzle. Because if we read it, it specifies that Patrick apparently weighed about 70 kilograms. And, well, considering that we did find another means of weighing ourselves or finding our own weight, yeah, that means that we are going to have to do a little bit of a math puzzle. The only other thing left for us in the laboratory here are these Roman nuts on the table here, along with some additional rifle rounds. And for the eagle-eyed viewer out there, you might have noticed this very large emptied out fireplace here. And as long as you made sure to read that hint in the previous room, it will strike Koudelka that maybe there might be something more to this fireplace than just some spot to start a fire. Yeah, there is a hidden away passageway. And inside we get a room with a very unhelpful camera angle, I would say. It's a bit hard to make out exactly what's going on in this room. Now you can kind of tell there is a door up here. It's just it is locked by a trick mechanism. And this is where that whole weight system is going to come into play. Because here we find an obscenely large doctor scale. And all we have to do is make it so that Koudelka's weight will equal out to 70. And all you have to do is set it to 25. Pretty simple puzzle all around. And at this point you might be a little confused as to maybe what our location is. And if we take a quick look at our map, we will see, well, we are running out of new places to explore, and in fact, I think we are almost to the back of the chapel where we saw all those really large vines before, but we were blocked off from getting to. Now, it is purely optional to look at this corpse here on the ground. Tinderbox is going to be something for an optional item later. But more importantly, we do get the final and best shotgun in the game, along with some additional shotgun shells, which is pretty much why I was holding off on using a shotgun up until now. I mean, you can get shotgun shells from, I think, a few random enemies, but yeah, even with that, we still really do not get that many shotgun shells, and that's because the shotgun is actually a pretty good ranged weapon, second only to the crossbow. Especially the shotgun 6 here, because the other shotguns only held 2 shots at a time. This one holding a whopping 6 shots and still managing to do more damage means it's, like I said, the best shotgun in the game. And I would say that maybe being down here would give us a prime opportunity to use it. It's just, well, in this little stoned area here, all you really run across are some cockroaches and ticks, and I mean, even though they are the highest level, most upgraded cockroaches and ticks, they are still really not even worth wasting ammo on. Still, we are slowly but surely managing to level up. And while normally you think we should be able to pretty easily progress here, it seems that the game has some other plans. And it seems to remind us that we still, well, we know we need to get rid of Elaine's body. We still don't really have an idea of how to do that. And it does mention that maybe we should check back in the main building, and hey, you might recall, we do have a pretty good source of information regarding immigrant document-related things back in the library.
I know it's here. I saw it here. I put it here. What? Have you come round to see me again?
I want you to look at this.
Research journals.
I want you to tell us whether what's written there can actually happen or not.
Well, let me see. Yes, I see. Oh, that's right. Resurrecting the dead. Ooh, a cauldron. The Branwyn tales, indeed. Yes. It is most likely that the events detailed here did take place.
Just as I thought. But that's so frightening that
Personally, I have not attempted it. I am certain that the immigrant document contained accounts of secret rituals conducted to resurrect the dead. But as you can tell from reading this, it involves complicated preparatory work. I had given up discerning the impossibility of using the psychic powers necessary to create such an immense psychic platform. Moreover, I never expected that people would attempt to challenge such a feat.
The journals say that the physical body was resurrected, but not the soul.
Absolutely. The ancients held the secret to life in the palm of their hands. But they could never come close to touching the secrets of the soul. They resurrected the dead in order to use their physical bodies as a workforce, thus building the great civilization we oft-times speak of. In fact, we would not be far off if we called them puppeteers. Exploiting the human body as an object.
if so, then wouldn't
Yes, resurrecting the dead and restoring them to life as it was before death is impossible.
Then how do you return the resurrected body once again to Earth?
That is a very complicated question, since it already defies universal logic.
Please.
It is no easy task.
Tell me how. It's what Elaine, God rest her soul, wanted.
Right. It is not absolutely impossible, but I would need to call forth the sacred powers in order to complete such a feat. Oh, yes. I know that the arm of Daniel Scotius, the man who built this monastery, is stored in a stone statue on the ground. If we throw that into a cauldron, we will successfully destroy the roots of the tree of life. Oh, after that, I haven't a clue whether to call forth the energies of fire or entrust the task to water. Oh, it is so complicated.
Fire. Or water.
What are we going to do?
Oh, Heavenly Father, bless our souls and bring forth an end to this suffering. Oh.
So it does seem that Roger might have some ideas with how to deal with the possessed corpse of Elaine, especially with the help of Patrick's macabre notes. It's just I don't know if I'm totally sure about what he was asking for. I mean, we do have that arm of Daniel. It's just that stuff about a tree and a cauldron, a bit of a mystery to us. I suppose, though, it was enough information, as we are now able to progress further into the chapel. And I guess it could be that those large wriggling vines that we saw before in that crack in the wall in the chapel might be a tree. Well, I don't know. I guess we're just going to have to wing it and pretty much do like everything else we've done in this game and just hope for the best. Now, overall, we don't have that many rooms left. And it should be a pretty straight shot to where we need to go. It's just, well, as with everything else in the game, it's just not that simple. First off, we do have to deal with another trick mechanism on a door. And for this, we don't have to go too far, just had to head back into the previous room. You might have noticed, or at least had your eye drawn to that little centerpiece there, amongst all the candles. And I do apologize, I don't think we fought this enemy before. He's known as the Minotaurus. And it's just that he's not that interesting. All he does is do some melee attacks. He has a bit of health. But otherwise, he's just a bunch of animal carcasses that Patrick was using to do a blood ritual. Not really anything to write home about. Yeah, if we look at this little center monument here, we'll see a collection of dolls, 4 of which we can interact with. And though we don't really get a hint ahead of time in regards to how to solve this puzzle, it's not really that difficult to figure out. I think all you have to do is turn all the dolls here so that they're facing towards the center. Though, if you do get stuck, you can go back to that upside-down head, and it does give you a hint in regards to this puzzle. Also, make sure to pick up those Roman nuts, because those are always useful. And there's also some pistol rounds, though, unless you've still been using the pistol, those definitely aren't as useful. But with all that, we are now just one room away from getting to that back area of the chapel. It's right off here to the left. Though it is very important, or I guess I would say pretty useful, to make sure and check out this right-hand room. Because hidden away in this very grandiose-looking, it seems like a mausoleum, is a fairly unique weapon. And you might be wondering just where it is, and, well, it's a bit hard to see because of how dark it is in here. So, as long as you made sure to pick up that tinderbox off that corpse, we can go ahead and light up these candles and get a very nice secreted away weapon. Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous looking sword, known as the Life Drinker. And, well, this sword is pretty much all around great. It doesn't really have any negative points to it. It has a lot of strength, it has a lot of dexterity, it only lowers your vitality by just a little. And most importantly of all, as its name would pretty much tell you, it will suck the life out of anything you attack. I think the only real drawback, and it's a pretty minor one, is that I haven't really shown it off, but whenever you use a HP draining ability or weapon, it will never kill the enemy. At most, it will only ever do how much damage the enemy has left, and it will just never take away that final point of damage. So that's, the only real negative to the weapon. But with that in hand, we should now be able to get into that final room of the chapel over here to the left. Or at least we should be able to. I mean, at least by looking at the map, there shouldn't be anything blocking it. But yeah, this is the one final and very large hurdle to getting to the very finale of the game. And it is a pretty tedious and tremendously large hurdle. But first we do have to deal with another quick little enemy encounter here, with the final form of the twitching baby and the crawling brain. And something that is kind of unique to the vestry here is that whenever you do manage to get an item drop from enemies, I don't know if it's a bug, but for some reason, every item you get will always be an elixir. I don't know if that's to give you some extra special useful items at this point in the game, but it can be pretty useful if you're trying to farm up items. And while it does say Tamako soup, that's just kind of a side effect from having the timed items in your inventory. But yeah, this is going to be our, I think, second to last real boss fight. And it's probably the worst boss fight of the game, I'd say. And it's not for the sake of difficulty that it is a terrible boss fight, at least in my opinion. And it's definitely not from a visual standpoint, because this boss known as the Apostle is really, really nicely designed. It is apparently a demon that disguises itself as an angel. And I think the form it's taking right now is not so much upside down. It's just its normal form, and I think it tries to confuse people by standing up right side and trying to take on the form of an angel. It's a really great design overall, at least from a visual standpoint. It's just, well, it's not that it does a lot in the way of magic damage. It's not the way in the fact that it does a lot of physical damage. It doesn't do any kind of weird status ailments on you. It does have a lot of health. I think it has almost 10,000 total HP, which is, compared to what we fought so far in the rest of the game, is pretty high, outside of maybe, if you've happened to fight the gargoyle. No, the main real difficulty, and kind of the reason why I am just trying to do nothing but cast up boost and supplemental spells, is because it has one primary and incredibly infuriating gimmick to it. And, well, that gimmick only comes to light whenever you start to notice, its movements. After this attack, start to notice that it is moving a little bit more frantically. And what that means is now that it is completely immune to physical damage. If you try to hit it with your weapons or shoot it, it will just miss every time. And if you do make the mistake of trying to cast any of your spells on it, no matter what element they are, it will heal him by a lot. If you hit him with Koudelka spell, you're probably going to heal him for about 3,000 to 4,000 damage. And if you're wondering, how long does he normally do his little funky dance? Well, it's random. It could last 3 turns, it could last 9 turns. It's completely up to the boss and the boss's AI. and there is no way to stop him from doing it. I don't think trying to hit him X number of times will stop him. I don't think trying to use the strategy of maybe like ricocheting his spells back at him to do a minor bit of healing will make any difference. And what makes it even more infuriating is that if he is in the middle of casting a spell, it'll look like he has stopped doing his little shake. But in actuality, he is still shaking, and he will do that kind of nonsense. And that is, the straw that broke the camel's back. Normally, I would give this guy the benefit of the doubt and maybe give him more time, have a legit fight with him. But he kind of pissed me off, because this took about 40 minutes to get a good run, so yeah. He got the full measure of my ire. Definitely a little bit of a slip up regarding the gimmick, but he is worth a lot of experience, which is good. I don't think we went into this underleveled by any measure. Yeah, both I think Koudelka and Edward get almost 2 levels apiece. And I think James only got 1, which is still not bad. I think we are right on the level where we should be at this point in the game. No, he got 2 levels, so that's good. And I'm mostly bumping up James's piety just because his MP pool is a bit low. But yeah, for our efforts, we did get an upgraded version of the crossbow, which is pretty nice. And we do get access to pretty much the second to last save point in the game. So, for right now, I'm going to bid you adieu, and hopefully you will join me next time as we head into the finale of Koudelka. See you then.